In today's video, I'm going to be giving you my Western Conference standings predictions for the upcoming NBA season. The last video I made a couple days ago was me making my Eastern Conference predictions for the standings, and if you missed out on that one, check the link down below in the description, it'll be linked there. So for the Western Conference, we have the stacked Western Conference. This is the stronger of the two, and we have a couple of super teams in this conference, and we have a lot of young teams as well that are looking to become playoff teams and stepping in the right direction. So this will be a very interesting season in the West. And something I forgot to mention last video is that at the end of the season, I'm going to be looking back at these predictions to see how I did and probably making a video on that too. It'll be interesting to see which teams overperformed and underperformed. But with that being said, let's get into the predictions for the season. Starting at number 15, I've got the Sacremento Kings. The Kings are one of the very few teams in the Western Conference that at least aren't stepping in the right direction. They have some young talent like De'Aaron Fox and Buddy Hield, but they don't really have a star that looks like they can develop into a true superstar in the league. Last year, they were pretty mediocre in both defensive and offensive efficiency, and this year, compared to the other teams that are up and coming in the league, I expect them to be pretty bad. So that's why I have them at last in the conference. Number 14, I've got the OKC Thunder. The Thunder have officially handed the keys of their franchise over to Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who I'm very high on, and I think he can turn into a superstar in the league one day. Now, if you thought the Thunder were blowing it up last year when they traded away Westbrook and Paul George, oh my goodness, that was just the start of it, because this year, first of all, when they traded Dennis Schroeder away, I thought, okay, they're starting to blow it up even more, but they still might be able to make a playoff push. But no. I mean, if these guys have every single first-round pick in the league, I wouldn't be surprised, and that's a decent strategy considering that you can't have every single first-round pick and have every single player be a bust. But yeah, anyway, they don't have a lot of talent on this team this year, but Sam Presti has a decent plan, I guess, by getting all these first-round picks. I have them at 14 for this year. Number 13, I have the San Antonio Spurs. Now, I actually heavily considered putting the Spurs last in the conference because there's really just not a lot of talent on this team, which is weird to say since they've always been such a consistent team making the playoffs, and they've had a dynasty over the last 20 years or so. But they have two stars in DeMar DeRozan and LaMarcus Aldridge, who are both aging. Obviously no superstars on this team. Their depth is really not that good, and their defense is pretty horrible too. But honestly, the only reason I didn't put them last is because they still have Greg Popovich. And if this team has Greg Popovich coaching them, they're not going to be last in the conference. Moving on to number 12 now, and getting into the teams that looking like they have a promising future and moving in the right direction. At number 12, I have the Minnesota Timberwolves. The Timberwolves, I think, made a really good decision by selecting Anthony Edwards with the first overall pick. I think he's the best player in the draft, and he can be a franchise player one day. Now, in terms of this positive of the team right now, I think they have a really good offensive duo in D'Angelo Russell and Karl Anthony Towns, who I think can be lethal in the pick and roll and get this team some wins just because of their offense alone. But there's two main problems on this team, which I've mentioned with a lot of teams, even in the last video too. One is depth. They don't really have any depth off their bench, and the other is defense. Try to name a good defensive player on this team. You probably can't. So they have a promising future, but their defense just straight up isn't good enough to make the playoffs. At number 11, I have the Portland Trail Blazers. A lot of people have this team making the playoffs, and even some people have them in their top 5, which makes my take here seem like a really hot take. But the thing you have to remember, this team's defense last year wasn't good. They were 28th in the league in defensive efficiency, and I think that's going to cause them even more problems this year because now in the Western Conference, you have even more deadly offenses that are going to be playing against them. Now, people will make the case that they actually are going to be good because when they are fully healthy, and we saw that in the seeding games in the bubble last year, when they're fully healthy, they're a really good team. But something you have to remember about those seeding games in the bubble is Damian Lillard was playing like the best player in the league. And he's the top 10 player in the league, in my opinion, no doubt. But him playing at an MVP level at the best in the league is not sustainable for a 72-game season. Also, I don't really think this team's depth is that good, so things like Damian Lillard not being able to be the best player in the league at all times, their depth, and also their really bad defense is what I think is going to keep them out of the playoffs. Coming in at number 10 now, I've got the Memphis Grizzlies. A couple teams have merged ahead of the Grizzlies, which is unfortunate because I think they're such a good overall team with tons of young talent. You've got Ja Morant, who obviously has superstar potential and just a really good overall game and very high potential. Then you have Jaren Jackson Jr., who I expect to put up 20 points per game this year, and he's the team's best defender. And then I also really like a guy like Brandon Clark because he has a really good overall game. He's a great defender. He can spread the floor and shoot. He's a great roll man to the basket, and I think he can be a most improved player candidate this year. But overall, this team realistically is built for the future more than they're built for now. So that's why I have them here at 10 and just missing out on the playoffs. Number 9, we got the Phoenix Suns. Now this was a really hard decision because the Suns made the trade to go out and get Chris Paul, and now they have what I consider a big three in Chris Paul, Devin Booker, and DeAndre Ayton. Chris Paul and DeAndre Ayton are the two players that Devin Booker needs to get him over the hump and start being considered as a winning player, because that's what he is. He's such a dynamic scorer and just an overall great offensive player, and these two players are going to help him try to get back into the playoffs. And it was such a hard decision to leave them out of the playoffs, but I have to because of their depth. These three guys are three of the guys that I see impacting the game at a big level for this team, but no one else really sticks out as someone that can help them really get over that hump and into the playoffs. Getting into the playoff teams now, at the 8th seed I have the Golden State Warriors. Now before we talk about the Warriors, I just have to say prayers up to Klay Thompson. Imagine how frustrating it is to tear your ACL, miss out the entire year, then right when you're about to come back to doing the thing that you love to do in life, you tear your Achilles and you have to miss out on another full 365 days of basketball. Unbelievable. I hope his career isn't over, so prayers up to you, Klay Thompson. But anyway, if this team had Klay, I think I'd have them at the 5 seed. I'd have some doubts about them because of things like Draymond being out of his prime, in my opinion, and maybe like a bad fit in Andrew Wiggins. And it is really going to be interesting to see how Wiggins and James Wiseman fit in with this team. And then ultimately when they lost Klay again, I thought about putting them at the 10 seed, but then I thought about it a little bit more, and the fact that they have Steph Curry, who is a top 5 player in the league still, is enough to get them into the playoffs. So that's why I have them at the 8 seed now. Number 7, I've got the New Orleans Pelicans. The Pelicans, again, are another team that are built for the future, but they're just so well built that I think they're going to make the playoffs this season and even have a good chance to get out of the first round. They have their franchise player in Zion Williamson, who if he can stay healthy is going to dominate inside like we've all seen him do, and I think he could be considered a top 20 player by the end of the year. Then you have your secondary scorer in Brandon Ingram, who's already made an all-star team. You've got Lonzo Ball, who can run the point, a very good playmaker, so that addresses playmaking. Then you have Eric Bledsoe now, who's also a good playmaker and probably their best perimeter defender. Steven Adams, who they've acquired and traded this year, who's going to be handling the paint and really make their defensive system good, in my opinion. And then to top it all off, if there wasn't a better fit for this team offensively, they have now 2 sharpshooters in JJ Redick and George Hills, who they also acquired through trade this year in the Drew Holiday trade. So overall, this team just has a little bit of everything at each aspect of the game. And they're just so well built overall, and they are built for the future, but this is why I have them making the playoffs. Now coming in at number 6, I have the Utah Jazz. And this is just a good team overall. Donovan Mitchell is their centerpiece on offense, and he's obviously an all-star caliber player that could be considered maybe a top 15 player at the end of this season. He's a great scorer. Then Rudy Gobert is their centerpiece on defense, and I still think he's a top 3 defender. He can protect the rim better than anyone, defend the pick and roll. And then just overall, though, this team doesn't have the star power to compete with the big dogs like the Lakers and the Clippers. So I think 6 is just a good overall ranking for them. They're not too good, but they're good enough definitely to make the playoffs and maybe get out of the first round. Number 5, the Houston Rockets. The Rockets have by far had the weirdest offseason of any team. Are they going to blow it up? Are they not? Oh, now they're not doing small ball anymore. Oh, they traded away Robert Covington. I don't know what's going on. Now, if they do blow it up, I don't have them making the playoffs. But the reason I have them really high here at 5 is because I still actually believe in James Harden and Russell Westbrook as a duo. And I believe in small ball as well for this team. I think it worked out in many different ways. And now they've signed DeMarcus Cousins and Christian Wood. And even though they're big men, they're still going to be able to stretch the floor for them. And they can impact the game on the defensive end as well, and be an inside presence on offense. So overall, this team's still really well built. They have a good offense and a good defense, and unless they blow it up, I have them here at 5 still. Now starting off the home court playoff teams, at number 4, I've got the Dallas Mavericks. Now, one of my hottest takes about the NBA that you should probably know if you're going to watch this channel is I already think that Luka Doncic is a top 5 player in the NBA, and I think he's a very strong MVP candidate this year. Last year, he led this team to one of the most efficient offenses in NBA history, and they ranked number 1 in the league last year, the Mavericks did, in offensive efficiency. I believe in him and Kristaps Porzingis as one of the best duos in the league, especially on the offensive end of the floor. The only thing that's going to be holding this team back a little bit is their defense, which is the only reason I don't have them number 1 or 2. But I still think it's pretty good, and I believe in Rick Carlisle's system, so that's why I have the Mavericks here at number 4. Number 3, I have the LA Clippers. The Clippers, just like we thought last year, are probably the best, if not the second best team on paper in the whole NBA. But they just have chemistry issues on both ends of the floor. Offense is self-explanatory, and defense, really, the fact that they weren't able to put together the best defense in the league last year with defenders like Kawhi, Paul George, and Patrick Beverley boggles my mind, honestly. And their chemistry just looks so bad at times that I don't even expect them to solve it this year, which is a problem for them since Kawhi Leonard will be a free agent next year. But anyway, they're still a top 3 team because obviously they have Kawhi, Paul George, and just a lot of overall talent on this team still. Number 2, I have the Denver Nuggets. Now, I have to give myself some credit here because last year before the playoffs when I was filling out my bracket, the biggest upset that I predicted was that the Nuggets would beat the Clippers in 7 games in the second round. And that's exactly what happened. And not a lot of people saw that coming, but the reason I did this is not because I thought the Clippers would choke, but because I think the Nuggets were so good. And they are, really. The reason I did this is because I think Nikola Jokic and Jamal Murray are a top 5 duo in the NBA, which they've essentially proven that they are after the playoffs. I think the Nuggets are the deepest team in the entire league, which is another big reason. And I think their defense, despite it being middle of the pack in terms of defensive efficiency, when it's at its best, it can definitely be top 5 caliber. And another reason I think the Nuggets are going to do so well this year is because they finally might have a third star on the offensive end of the ball in Michael Porter Jr. We saw just how good he can be scoring the ball in the seeding games last year in the bubble. And yes, how could I almost forget? The Nuggets also have the god himself, Bol Bol, who in all seriousness could actually have a pretty good impact on this team this year as a role player. And lastly, at number 1, take a wild guess at who it is. Yep, it's the Los Angeles Lakers, and this is going to be the team to beat in the NBA in my opinion until LeBron and AD aren't together anymore. So the fact that they added the 2 best 6th men in the league just makes it completely unfair. This team is easily the best in the league right now, and they're my championship favorites at the start of the year. So there you have it. My Western Conference standings predictions for this upcoming season. Like I mentioned at the start of the video, if you haven't checked out the Eastern Conference video already, make sure to do that. It'll be linked down below in the description. And in terms of this video, feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments, what you agreed with, what you disagreed with, but just remember to always respect everyone's opinion. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for new videos. I'll see you guys there.